I am a 19-year-old male, and this happened many years ago when I was very young. To give you an idea of the layout of our house back then, the living room has multiple windows that directly look out onto the back garden. There's a big gate in our driveway to stop anyone from getting in. Next to the living room is the kitchen, which also has more windows, but also the back door. This will be relevant to the story. So my mother was completing the household chores as she does one day. I was sitting in the living room watching television on the sofa with my back to the living room windows. All of a sudden, I saw a figure reflecting off of the picture frame hanging on the wall opposite the window. I asked my mom if my dad was back from work, to which she said no. I'll never ever forget the look of horror on her face when I told her that yes, he was. He's in the garden. She looked outside the window and almost had a heart attack when she saw a scruffy looking but fairly built man outside the living room window. This didn't seem to faze him at all though. He psychotically smiled at my mother through the glass, and my mom asked him what he was doing on our property. He said nothing, with the same sadistic smirk on his face. She said that she was going to call the police, and what he said is one of the scariest things I've ever heard. He screamed at my mother through the glass that if she even got her phone out, that he would break the glass. She did not know what to do. She paused and tried to rapidly think of what to do next, how to keep us both safe. She wanted to protect me by calling the police, but she also didn't want him to hurt me if she did try to call them. As soon as he saw that she was terrified, he ran for the back door. Luckily, it was locked because my mom has always been a paranoid person, so she always locks the doors. He screamed at her to let him in, or if she didn't, he'd find a way in and kill us both. My mother told him to fuck off, which enraged him, and he pulled out a pocket knife and began bashing hard against the windows. I was still oblivious to what was happening, as I just thought it was my dad. I was very young. My mom frantically grabbed me, and I don't mean picked me up. She literally grabbed me off the sofa and booked it up the stairs. We were backing up in the upstairs hallway, looking for anywhere to hide, when my mom's younger brother popped out of his room with his headphones on. My mom didn't even realize he was home, and he clearly didn't hear the commotion downstairs because of his headphones. My uncle was 25 at the time and was really well built. He's intimidated a lot of people. My mom cried and told him that there's a guy who's trying to break in. While she's telling him this, that creepy lunatic screamed from downstairs that he was in the house. He said cynically, "Boogeyman is coming out to get you," which really freaked me out. It freaked me out so much that I actually remember that to this day. Anyway, since the guy didn't know my uncle was home, he kept yelling and telling us to come out and that it wouldn't be painful. My uncle told us to lock ourselves in the bathroom and call the police. We did, and after 5 minutes of groaning and blatant violence downstairs, the police stormed in and found the guy bloodied and my uncle on top of him, beating him mercilessly. My uncle really didn't hold back. Turns out that he was a known pedophile, which is why he was watching me for so long while I was watching TV. After that day, my mom was terrified to be home alone at the house. I loved it as a child because I found the running and hiding fun, obviously because I was young. I can never thank my uncle enough for being there at the right time when my mother clearly forgot that he was still home. It honestly gives me chills, wondering what he would have done to my mother and myself if my uncle was not there. This didn't happen to me. However, I did witness this incident, and it creeps me out to this day. Back in junior high school, there was this popular kid named Ryan that used to bully me. He had many vehicles but his favorite was a truck with orange and yellow flames on the front. It also had tinted windows and spinning hubcaps on the wheels. Ryan's father often wore the same team jersey as his son's team jersey, a red and white hat and blue jeans. As you continue reading, you will soon discover why the details of this particular truck, as well as its owner, are very important. One day, on my way to my next class, I fell down the stairs and sprained my ankle. I ended up limping to the nurse's office and calling my dad to come pick me up. After that, I sat in the waiting area, looking out from my dad's car. About 5 minutes after I left the nurse's office, Ryan walked into the waiting area and sat down. Bored out of his mind, Ryan decided to talk to me while we were waiting for our dads to pick us up. I guess he felt safe talking to a nerd since his friends weren't around. So I decided to be polite with him and made small talk. About 5 or so minutes later, Ryan looked out the glass doors and saw his father's truck pulling into the entrance of the school. Ryan got up and said, "See you later, man," picked up his backpack and headed towards the glass doors. He was about to push the door open when he suddenly stopped. When I asked him what was wrong, Ryan explained to me that his father usually picked him up later and that he usually parked his truck right next to the glass doors. Instead, Ryan's dad was 20 minutes early. The truck was next to the flagpoles, which were much farther away, and that the hubcaps appeared to be different and didn't even spin. After a few minutes of this, Ryan's cell phone then went off. Ryan at this point simply assumed that it was his dad and didn't pick it up. So he walked out the door and headed towards the truck. I decided to take a nap while I waited for my own dad to pick me up. Suddenly, I heard what sounded like an older man yelling and Ryan screaming. I looked out the window only to see Ryan flailing his arms and an older man trying to pull him into the truck. Because of my ankle, I couldn't run to Ryan's aid, so I shouted to the nurse as well as to some other staff members to get help. One of the nurses immediately called the police. A couple of secretaries ran toward the truck to help Ryan. Upon seeing the secretaries running towards him, the creep shoved Ryan away and climbed further into the truck. The guy then sped off and disappeared into the intersection that led into a nearby highway. Ryan at this point was crying in pain, mainly because the guy had pepper sprayed him. The secretaries helped poor Ryan to his feet and guided him to the nurse's office. About a few minutes later, the police, along with Ryan's real father, arrived. The police, as well as an ambulance, tended to Ryan while a couple of police officers interviewed me and the other witnesses. Because I was the only student to witness this, the police, as well as Ryan's dad, asked me to stay in touch and hang out with Ryan, just so that he could have a shoulder to lean on and recover emotionally. So I swallowed my pride and gave Ryan my phone number. From that day forward, Ryan was a completely different person. The same person who used to body slam me into lockers was now in constant fear and used my body as a shield instead of a punching bag. There wasn't a day at school where Ryan wasn't around me. He was especially clingy and paranoid when it came to having his dad pick him up. It even got to the point that Ryan would call me every night to vent his fears as well as update me on what the police would find. And many of the details about this were very, very creepy. For instance, the creep, whoever he was, not only knew where Ryan went to school and where he got picked up, he even knew which vehicle Ryan's dad drove whenever he picked up his son from school. He decided to imitate everything about Ryan's father. That's right. The creep actually went through the trouble of painting his own truck the same colors as his father's, just to fool and lure Ryan. He even dressed up like Ryan's dad. Ryan even said to me that this disguise was so convincing that it wasn't until he looked the creep in the eye that he realized it wasn't his dad. This happened back in the summer of 9th grade. So I was invited to a sleepover at this kid named Jacob's house. Jacob had this reputation for having a bad family and just being weird and awkward himself. He was in my math class, and I was partnered up with him for a project where I helped boost his mark, so I guess he sort of warmed up to me. For his birthday, he held a sleepover and invited 3 other kids and I to come. I didn't really want to go, but I told my friends about the invitation and they convinced me to just go, saying that it would be fun and that I would figure out what kind of guy Jacob really was. I was hyped up on my friends and decided to go after all. So I was dropped off by my mom, and when I stepped onto the porch, I realized that the doorbell looked broken. Like the rectangular case that covered the wiring was shattered. I had a sudden fear of being electrocuted, so I went to knock instead. Just as I raised my fist, I noticed some muffled shouting from within the house, loud enough to be heard over the hum of my mom's car engine. The shouting kinda alarmed me, and I turned to look at the car, which was waiting for me to enter the house. I started having second thoughts of staying, but the idea of looking like a coward in front of my friends motivated me to knock loudly. The shouting cut abruptly, so abruptly that I thought they were just watching TV or something, and muted it when I knocked. The door suddenly swung open, and I was expecting a huge, looming figure to tower over me, but all I saw was skinny, pale Jacob. His face brightened when he saw me, and he ushered me in. I waved to my mom and watched her back out of the driveway and down the road. I peered into the house, but from the entrance, I could only see the living room, a staircase, and a hallway. All 3 areas were empty, but I saw the flickering light of a TV from the turn of the hall. Jacob took me upstairs into the very last room. It was an extraordinarily clean room with a dresser and a bed pushed together into the corner and an analog clock hanging from the wall, leaving a lot of the room completely empty. To my dismay, I was the first one there. I thought of how awkward it would be if no one else showed up, and that thought made me panic a bit. I sat down on the carpet and pulled my iPod Touch out of my backpack, asking Jacob to insert his Wi-Fi's password. He took my iPod and fiddled around with it for at least 5 minutes. Each minute grew longer and more awkward until I asked, "Did you forget the password?" Jacob bit his lip, and then the doorbell rang. I jumped to my feet and told him, "I'll get it. You just try and remember the password." I hurried down the stairs and opened the front door, where I saw a kid I didn't know very well. I only knew he was in our grade. I showed him upstairs, telling him, "Oh, I'm glad you came. I thought I would be the only one." To which he said, "I wouldn't have come if my mother didn't make me." We walked into the room, and I noticed Jacob wasn't in it. I didn't think much of it, and took the opportunity to get familiar with the other dude. He told me that his name was Lance, and he had once helped Jacob by giving him a few extra dollars to buy his lunch, and he didn't think Jacob would remember him. We both talked about the rumors about Jacob, and whether he actually had bad parents, or if he was just going through a phase. At some points we heard loud thuds downstairs, to which we'd shut up and widen our eyes at each other. The thudding would stop, and after a few moments we would continue chatting. I told him about the shouting, but how it could have just been the television. Lance shook his head and said that he once saw Jacob with his parents in the grocery store, and they had been arguing then too. At this point, I was glad I came because I started to pity Jacob, and that's when he entered the room. "I'm sorry I'm late," he said, sounding out of breath. "I was trying to get the Wi-Fi password, but..." It's down right now. The Wi-Fi. Sorry. I told him it was okay. We all waited for the other two boys that Jacob invited to come. It started to become apparent that they weren't, and I made up excuses for both of them after I saw the crestfallen look on Jacob's face. We awkwardly chatted for a bit, ate some chips, and talked about our schedules and stuff for grade 10. He told us he would be moving away before September, and Lance and I asked normal questions to keep the conversation going. Then, after the small talk got tiring, we agreed to fall asleep early. We all brushed our teeth and changed. Then Jacob went to his bed, while Lance and I slept on the floor in our sleeping bags. After trying to sleep for what I'd say was about 15 minutes, I just grabbed my iPod, turned the brightness down, and started to scroll through it. After I got bored with games and such, I went to my messages and decided to read back on some conversations with my friends. That's when I noticed that on the top, where newly messaged people were, was an unknown number. Confused, I pressed on it and was horrified to see that a bunch of pictures that I had took of my friends and myself were sent to this number from my camera roll. And all of them read delivered, which meant I was connected to a source of internet for these to be sent. I could only think of Jacob as the culprit, and I got really freaked out because he had just sent my pictures to somebody, and I didn't remember Jacob ever having a phone. I didn't know what to do, so I shook Lance awake, keeping my eyes on Jacob's still form. It took Lance forever, but I managed to make him turn around and look at me through bleary eyes. In a whisper, I asked, "Can you come to the washroom with me?" Lance groaned and turned back around, muttering, "Don't be a sissy." I shook him violently and told him that he needed to come with me, and I annoyed him so much that he pushed himself out of his sleeping bag and hit me hard on the arm. I was so panicked I didn't care, and I dragged him out of the room, opening every door in the hallway slowly until I found the washroom. I shoved him in and locked the door, and he looked seriously freaked out. "What the hell are you doing?" he asked angrily, and I showed him my messages and explained the situation. He told me I must have butt sent it, but I told him that this was an iPod, and I couldn't send anything without Wi-Fi. Lance's angry look had shifted to look nervously excited now, and he assured me I was overreacting. "But we can call the number on my phone if you want," he said. And I thought this was a good idea. The ringing started a bit late, and then we heard the music of an incoming call coming in from one of the other rooms. It took a second for us to realize this, and when we did, we both went into a flurry of shocked nervousness. Lance muted the ringing on his phone and tiptoed out of the bathroom. We heard the ringing coming from one of the bedrooms as we tiptoed down the corridor, and we both shared a terrified look. When we went back into Jacob's room, he was sitting up in his bed. Lance quickly ended the call and nudged me, like I should have confronted him or something. Jacob asked us why we were awake, and Lance just looked at me, expecting me to answer. I told Jacob I had to go to the bathroom, and Lance was already awake, so I took him along. Jacob just kind of sat there, so Lance and I curled back into our sleeping bags. Neither Lance nor I actually slept. We just turned our backs on each other and lay there, breathing heavily, unsure about what to do in this situation. Oddly, I drifted off to sleep and was awoken by Lance early in the morning. He let me call my mom, and I asked her to pick me and Lance up, since Lance didn't have a ride that early in the morning. We told Jacob goodbye, thanks for inviting us over, and all of that. I really wanted to say something about the messages to him, but I was really, really creeped out, and I didn't want to make the whole thing awkward. He did move late August, and I never told my parents about this, only my friends. This happened 3 years ago. I now have this weird paranoia of handing people my phone, locked or unlocked. Here is some context to my story. My backyard is a complete desert. The fence is about 50 to 60 feet away from my house and the front door. But due to weather conditions, some of my fence had broken and fallen down, so anyone could just stroll right into my yard. I was about 14 when we got our second dog. She was a good-looking dog, a pit bull bulldog mix. My parents went out to Walmart one day while I stayed home with the new dog. Her name was Leela. Anyway, she wanted out, so I let her and my other dog go out back. I stood out there with them, petting them and playing with them, and that's when I heard a deep voice grumble out, "Hello." I froze and turned around. There was some man in my backyard with a yellow jacket on, the hood covering his face. I rushed to the door, just in case he tried something. He definitely was creepy and suspicious. "Yes?" I asked, holding Leela by the collar in front of me, hoping a dog that looked like a ferocious pit bull would bring some sort of fear into his heart. There was a moment of silence before he asked, "Do you have a phone I can use? My car broke down the street." I came up with a very stupid reply of, "No, we don't have any phones," and then ran back in the house with both dogs. I called my mom, and both her and my father rushed to get home as quickly as possible. As I was on the phone, the man stayed in my yard, just watching the house. After 5 minutes, he walked out of my yard, out of the weeds, and rounded the corner to another street. My parents came home a few minutes later. They had done a quick look around the neighborhood, but there was no broken down car, and the man in the mysterious yellow jacket was gone. Thank you all for watching. I really appreciate all the support, and I wanted to give a shout out to one of my new friends. His name is Mortis Media. If you haven't checked out his channel already, I urge you to do so. I will leave the link to his channel in the description to this video. And if you enjoy being scared, stay tuned. I am just getting started.